Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and I love Chromebooks and I love cheap computers, and I've got something here that is a mix of the two. This is the Teqnio, and it's available at Walmart for, at the moment, $129, but some viewers let me know that you can get these for as little as $100 from time to time when they're on sale. It's an 11.6-inch Chromebook. It's got a Rockchip RK3288 processor inside, and for the money, it performs really well, and we're going to do a full review of it right now. But I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that I paid for this with my own funds. All the opinions you're about to hear are my own. Nobody is paying for this review, and no one has reviewed what you're about to see before I uploaded it. So let's get to it now and see what this little laptop can do. So let's take a closer look now at the hardware. This again has that Rockchip RK3288 processor built in. We've seen this on a few other Chromebooks in the last year or two, and it usually runs pretty nicely. 4 gigs of RAM, which is nice, and 32 gigabytes of storage, which is also nice for a low-end Chromebook at this price point. The display is 1366 by 768. It's 720p essentially. The viewing angles aren't bad on it. This is a TN display, which usually doesn't have very decent viewing angles, but this one seems to do okay. The display, though, is a bit on the cold side, and as you turn the brightness up, it gets more and more washed out. So do not expect a high-quality image out of this, but for the price, I'm willing to make that sacrifice. It looks okay for what it is. It weighs about 2.46 pounds or 1.12 kilograms, so not all that heavy. It's got 802.11n Wi-Fi. It also is compatible with the Google Play Store, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Battery life, we're looking at about 6.5 to 7 hours, depending on what you're doing with it. If you're doing a lot of media consumption, that might drain the battery a little faster than just browsing some websites and doing word processing and that sort of thing. It's got a couple of ports worth mentioning here. We've got the power port right over here, a USB 2.0 port here. You have HDMI out over here, and one of the things that I tested earlier was hooking it up to a 1080p monitor, and we were able to get 1080p out of the HDMI while still having a 720p display available here too. So you can run it in dual monitor mode if you want to kind of use it as a desktop when you get back to your home or office. So that was cool to see on there. Over here, you've got a micro SD card slot, so if you have a lot of media or something that you want to load up, you can do that there. USB 2.0 here, and you've got a combo headphone microphone jack right over there. And the overall build quality surprised me on this. It really feels relatively rugged. I haven't thrown it around or anything to really test that, but it's got a nice hard plastic feel to it. It doesn't feel like cheap plastic. It even has metal here underneath the keyboard for where you rest your wrist here when you're typing. So really feels like a nicely constructed laptop for the low price point there. The trackpad feels very nice. It's a smart click pad, so you can do your 2-finger click for the right click and your single finger click for the left click, and a lot of the gestures work here, including 2-finger scrolling and pinch to zoom and whatnot. So the trackpad is really well done for the price. Keyboard is also pretty nice. I would like a little more travel to it, but it feels very familiar because Google stipulates how these Chromebook keyboards look and feel, and this one feels very similar to many other 11-inch Chromebooks I've used. I think I might like the one on the Acer a little bit better, but if you're really on a budget here, this keyboard is not bad at all. It's got decent spacing and, again, very familiar keyboard layout because it follows that Chromebook rule set about it. So all in, I am quite pleased with what they have here for the price point. Let's take a look now and see how it performs. So let's take a look at one of the core functions of a Chromebook, which is web browsing using its internal Chrome browser. We're on the nasa.gov homepage right now, and we're connected to my 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi. It's wireless N and not AC though, just bear that in mind. And you can see as we're jumping around to different pages, things render very quickly here. It's got a very snappy performance to it, even when you've got a lot of images and other multimedia kind of coming into play. So the performance here for web browsing feels just fine, and I was doing some other stuff like Google Docs and email and whatnot, and those all seem to perform quite well. The one issue we ran into was 60 frames per second video playback, both at 720p and 1080p. You will get a number of drop frames, trying to keep up with that higher frame rate. So if you're a fan of 60 frames per second content on Twitch or on YouTube, you might see some drop frames and a little bit of sluggishness here or there, but overall not bad for the price point, and 30 frames per second playback seemed to do just fine for us. We also ran the Browserbench.org speedometer test, and there we got a score of 21.7, which is a little slower than some of the other devices we've looked at, but not as slow as some other cheap devices out there, so that was good to see. The Asus Chromebook Flip that came out recently, the revised version with the new Rockchip processor, did about double the performance there. So you can see the next generation of this Rockchip chip will bring greater performance in the future, and I would expect we would see probably a revision of this laptop coming in a year or two that might perform the way the Asus one does now. So you can see what you're getting here for the price point, but in reality, when you're just browsing around the web, it seems to work just fine. Now, one thing that Google has added recently to Chrome OS is the ability to run Android apps on the device, and this one runs them just fine. You can load up the Google Play Store here and get all of your favorite Android apps installed on the computer, which is great to see. I like that they've made it a little easier to run the Android apps and that you can resize them now and get the windows to where you want them to be, depending on the app, of course. Games also run pretty nicely on here, too, so I've got Pac-Man 256 installed on here, which is one of your standard casual mobile games, which is very well suited for the processor inside of this device. So we can go ahead and start playing that. I did find that Bluetooth controllers work on this too. It's got Bluetooth built in, so I was able to get my game controllers working with the Android games that support that. These Chromebooks are very good for retro game emulation now as well. So, the 80s and 90s consoles work great on this. There's a great free app called RetroArch you can install to get those games running. And having the storage here really helps because you can keep the emulators and the ROMs on the internal storage, and you can play when you're offline too, which is great. I also ran PUBG Mobile earlier. A lot of people have been asking about that on here. Now, that game is designed more for touchscreens, and I was able to get the game installed and use my controller to move the character around, but I couldn't fire the weapons or anything due to how the game is configured. And that's been some controversy in the PUBG community recently because people on touchscreens are at a disadvantage to those on keyboard and mouse. So I think there might be some compromise they're working on to get it working better. But on the low settings, it worked just fine here on the laptop. It took a little bit initially when I downloaded it to get the game up and running, but once it was installed, it ran pretty nicely here on this very low-end piece of hardware. So all in, I think this is a very nice little computer for the price point. I still think the Acer Chromebook 11 we looked at about 2 weeks ago is better, but it also costs $60 more. That Chromebook has a better display than this one does, which is important if you plan to be using this a lot. But if it's something you're getting for a kid or just something to have as something you can take with you from time to time, I don't think you'll have a bad experience with this. It also looks like the company has some US presence, so you will get some support if you need it. It has a 1-year warranty as well, so I think it's a very low-risk proposition and a very nicely performing laptop if you're not looking to spend all that much money on something portable. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold-level supporters of the Black Eyed and Blues Music Hour podcast: Chris Allegretta, Tom Albrecht, and Kalyan Kumar. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.